Well, this was an email that came in. This person says, you had a tutorial on the anatomy of light showing the effect of light on a sphere. Would you please make a quick tip on the effect of light on a colored sphere? And he goes in and says, after all, we don't see pure colors in nature. Yeah, this is going to be fun. Well, it always helps to know what to look for when we're painting. And it would be really, really helpful if you think of light and shadow as each having an anatomy. I mean it. The parts that create each section of light and shadow. Now on a sphere we can see those. We don't always see them all on any sphere. But what we can look for is what the previous quick tip was about what can happen on a sphere, or it can happen on other surfaces too. So what we look for, and then I'll show you the answer, or I'll show you a little demo that shows how color on a sphere, on anything round, but color will actually change in light as it moves from light to shadow. It actually changes from one hue to another many times. But what do we look for? Well, one thing, when the light shines, as we see the light hitting on this sphere right here, when the light hits the sphere, their light rays will hit as they're moving around, but the light rays get weaker as the sphere moves away from the light rays. And then it reaches a point somewhere in the sphere. It doesn't show really clear here, but reaches a point where the light rays shoot past the sphere, and that's where the shadow begins. And when that happens, we have a term we use called a terminator. It's that area on any sphere or any rounded shape where the light rays shoot past and the sphere itself begins to go into shadow. That's called the terminator. So it's really kind of difficult to say here, but say we can kind of feel it about right in there. Now, what happens on that side, as the light moves around, you'll notice that it will continue, the sphere itself will continue to get darker. And so we call those areas shadow. The areas where the light misses any shape, where the light rays can't strike. Also, we call areas that are blocked by any image a cast shadow. So we have two kinds of shadow there. Form shadow is light that's on an image, and cast shadows, light's being cast by an image or by some shape. So see how that divides into two parts, light and shadow. Within the shadow, many times you might see something right next to that terminator. It's a little bit darker. You don't see it here, but you might see it, and that's called a core shadow. Now I've heard teachers and artists call this whole form shadow core shadow, but it's not. It's a form shadow. The core shadow is just that little bit of shadow there that begins to feel a little lighter, and the reason it does is because light begins to bounce from other surfaces into the shadow, reflecting into the shadow, but it doesn't hit that part right there, and it's called core shadow. Within the form shadow, and again it doesn't really show clearly here, but we had to do the best we could, within the form shadow and the cast shadow, those two areas, we will often find a shadow, a small little shadow that's called the occlusion shadow. That's where two surfaces are touching and no light can go. So we got the form shadow, we got the occlusion shadow. And in the light, we have some changes. In the light part, where the light rays are hitting, we have where the light's hitting the strongest, called the center light. Then we have those areas where the light rays are not hitting quite so strong. We call those halftones. And the halftones actually begin to change in color. Now you can see it a little bit here, not quite as clear as I'm going to show you in just a moment. But you can see that the color of blue here has a little bit more green in it. I've made these samples up here for you to see. This has just a little bit more green in it. If we put a diagram that shows the continuation of the of hues as they move one hue into the other in the spectrum, you can see about right in here is where that blue begins to register. In other words, when the light hits it strongly, it wants the color wants to move towards the color of the light. So if the light is warm like the sunlight, then if it's something that's got a blue local color like this, which is registering about right here, as the light hits it stronger, that color begins to look more like this. And then as it goes into the shadow, the light begins to look more like this, as you can see right here. So look for that. Look for how the color changes from the point that we're talking more like sphere. Now, if you learn to see it in a sphere, it makes it easier to see on other surfaces that are not spherically shaped. So that's sort of what we look for. There's not theory. It's something that happens, that light does in light and in shadow, or in the light rays and then in the shadow. Now, you can do an experiment, and I suggest one of the best things that you can use to see this phenomenon is a tomato. Now, I've got a tomato here. I don't have a tomato here. I have a photo of a tomato. I have a photo of a tomato here, and let me put this back up again to show you. You can see, just lean this more. You can see now that red tomato. The red tomato is what I'm talking about, but you could use any color, but I'm using a red tomato here. Look at how that red tomato changes. Look at where the light, right in there, right in here, we can see where the center light is, where the part of that tomato that is most directly in line with the light, that's the center light right there. And as it moves in this direction, you see it's moving, the light rays are still hitting, but it reaches a point about right in here where the tomato shape is turning away from the light, causing shadow. Watch how that changes in color as it turns away from the shadow. You can see it right here. You can see that as it goes towards light, you see it's trying to move towards the color of light right in here. Now, some of that could be the local color of the tomato, but if you get any red tomato and put it under light, you'll see some degree of that happening. And then as it moves into shadow, it really does begin to move more towards more towards the violets. It begins to get deeper and lose something of its intensity too. So I'm going to just do a very quick and dirty demonstration for you here to show you how that works. So if we are working, let's say, with a tomato shape, and I would say something, I'm going to get, as I said before, this is going to be very quick and dirty, because I don't want to get real deep into, I don't want this to go too long for you, but say you can just sort of quickly diagram a shape, and this is sort of representing what I'm seeing right here, and we can see about right here is where the top of the tomato is, and the little doolally there, stem. Let's move this down just a little bit right here. Now, you can see right down here, you can see just a little bit in this where the tomato is sitting on, you see the cast shadow, and you almost see the occlusion shadow. It's almost going out of sight there in the photo. You can notice in the cast shadow, notice how the red reflecting in there too, but we're going to talk about the surface of the tomato. I can kind of look at what the surface of the tomato has. Now, what I need to pull out on the palette, I'm going to pull out alizarin crimson, because I know alizarin crimson is a dark red. And so I'll start out with that. Now, I could also begin to just go around my palette here and pull out alizarin crimson, and then pull out cadmium red light, and then and on like that, and begin to get that gradation of color that we see there. But instead, I'm going to do something that's similar to that. I'm just going to mix the I'll pull just a little bit more. It's going to take more than that. A little more of that, and pull just a little bit more of that alizarin down right here. There we go. You can already look here. If I put the alizarin here, and then I take this is cadmium yellow deep, which is a yellow orange. which we see like right in here. See, there we go. And if I begin to mix those together just a little bit right here, we can begin to see what's happening right in there. Now, we can see also in the orange, this photograph is a little bit desaturated, so we'll have to take that into consideration. But we'll see some white begin to move in. And what I've done here, this is from a previous quick tip, this is white with a tiny bit of yellow-orange added into it, which better represents light that we're working with. Just add just a tiny bit of the yellow into it. Now, I like to start in the shadow side. Now I'm going to do one more thing here. Because I know that, let's put the color wheel up just for a moment to show you how I'm thinking this thing through. Because I know that red and red-orange, we can see that more is red in here, but it's more like red-orange right in here, that color, that tomato. I know that its complement is blue-green. Red-orange's complement is blue-green. And I know that as that red-orange moves around that surface, it's going to lose something of its saturation. So I'm going to pull some blue-green. This is my Rembrandt Viridian, which is my preference for blue-green. Rembrandt, not only those other colors Viridian, which are pretty rotten in my estimation. All right, let's do it very, very quickly now, very quickly. If I start with a shadow of that tomato, and I begin to sort of very loosely block in, very loosely, just very loosely, block in the shadow area, just a little bit more of that, where the shadow begins as it goes around the tomato. And I'm going to begin to move into that shadow and add a tad of that Viridian, just a tad of the Viridian, and watch what happens here. See how that works? Let's do it this way. Very, very, that's almost too thin. Let's get that just a little bit more, pull just a little bit more color into that. There we go. Okay. Now we can also see in that particular, I'm just going to get that very, we can also see here that light reflecting back. And when we have the light reflecting back, we just ask ourselves, what color are we looking for? And rinse the brush off there so I can not have this color in it. And we can see a little bit more of that yellow-orange reflecting through back here. So you see there would go right there. And now, just a blend of that. Just a blend. If I blend that too much, it's going to get muddy, so we don't want that to happen. So we have that. That color is still a little bit thin. Let's get that a little bit better. There we go. A little bit more of that rich color in there. Add just a little bit too much of the, there's just a little too much medium there. Okay, now begin to move and see what happens as this is in the shadow area. Block in rough. Move towards the shadow, as it moves. This is the terminator right here. Now as it begins to move towards the light is where we're going to see that local color. In that area of the terminator, just right on the light side where the light rays are shining of the terminator, we're going to see that local color. And here it is right here. It's pretty close. And if you'll notice on a lot of spherical objects, in some spherical objects, you'll see that local color. I'm just blocking this in now. I'm not trying to make anything out of it yet. You'll see that local color, but you'll see very little of it. We are often misled by just how much we think we see. And we see that gradually, as this is moving more towards where the light's hitting it, it's gradually getting more yellow-orange. More maybe orange first and then yellow-orange, so we have more of this sort of thing happening right here. Let's get that roughly in. And what's happening on the other side? On the other side we're seeing just a little bit of the red. So on the other side we're seeing just a little bit of the red come through here. Just a little bit. And this is, I'm intentionally doing this more in the diagram form so that you can see what's underneath what we're really seeing there. And then it gets, now there, what we're seeing happen there, we're seeing that yellow-orange get a little bit less saturated. So I'm going to put just a little bit of the white in there, in that yellow orange. I think maybe a little bit redder than that. Let's see what happens there. There we go, right there. Okay, now we can begin to see what happens. Let's get that little bit more of that white. Now right in here where the light hits it, we're going to need some white. Let's get a paper towel here. Let's off the brush. And where the light hits it, let's just get the pure white right in here, or about right in here where the light hits it, and then we will work that. And we'll come in here, pick up just a little bit more of what we see there. It's getting a little bit more orange, and then of course it goes into the stem. Now, I don't have the paint quite thick enough there to show you what I'm really trying to show you. There we go, that's better. Now if we begin to sort of refine that, and go back into the shadow area, what I have designated the shadow area, back in the shadow area here, and I'll just begin to pull the brush with a little bit of color in it to give that a refinement, and you'll begin to see that the feeling of that roundness. Okay, rinse the brush off, thoroughly dry the brush, and begin to pull it this way. Just pull it over, one color over the other like that, and pull it towards the shape that we're seeing there. You can see it's very, very rough here. The whole thing is very rough, but I hope to give you the idea of how the color changes and what we can do to make that happen. Okay, let's get that means just a little bit more color in there. So let's get this a little bit more into the brush there, and then begin to pull it in the direction of that shaping. And just a little bit more of that red in there, and pull it in the direction where it's moving towards that center. And a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of that red back in here, because that what's happening there is that, there we go, right there. There we go. Now pull that a little bit more towards the edge there, and towards the center there. Now let me rinse that brush out again and dry it thoroughly. One thing that when we rinse the brush, we should always be careful that we dry it thoroughly. And I'm going to, just using a very light stroke, begin to pull those together. We'll go this direction to keep that from blending in. There we go. That begins to show you that sense. Now I'll just do just a little bit there to indicate the stem part, so that you can see the contrast there. I'm not going to do much there, except just sort of indicate it, just to give that difference in value of the stem, to kind of show you what happens there. Okay, that's very, very rough. Now one thing too, one thing that always affects the color will be the background, the environment in which the image is located. And I haven't included that in this lesson, because the lesson is not about that environment, it's about what happens to color. What happens to color. And so this is very, very rough. With a little bit of time we could shape it up and really make a tomato out of it, but the point here is not to do a painting of tomato for you so much as it is to demonstrate to you how you can use color, or how you can change the color to show how the actual color, the actual local color of a spherical image, as on within the image itself, that local color is going to change. So you're going to find just the local color about right in here at that point where the terminator, right at the edge of the terminator where it goes in the shadow, you're going to find just a little bit of local color there, and you can expect, now the degree to which it changes is going to be different depending on how much local color, light, all kinds of stuff. But what you can expect and look for is how does the color change, and then you place the changes of color there. So you see that when you're painting something that's either, of course, I've got to pick at something, but if you try to change the color just by adding white to it, that's not going to cut it. That's just going to change the value of it. But if you then change the color according to the hue, change the actual hue of the color, then you're going to come closer to what you're actually seeing. So we'll put just a little bit of something there to represent that center light. It's called, now people, I've heard people give different definitions of center light. So the center light from and highlight, the two points there, center light and highlight. The center light is that place on any spherical image or on any image, the place that's most closely aligned or perpendicular with the light source. That always will show much lighter than whatever else is appearing there. The highlight is often referred to as a reflection on the surface, a reflection on the surface that will be taking on the shape of whatever the light source is. And sometimes the center light and highlight are the same thing, and sometimes the reflection of the shape of the image might be casting somewhere other than the center light. Now, as I said before, this is very, very rough, but it gives you an idea of what happens when you have color in light and in shadow on a spherical image, and how you can look for that color to change, or the hue within the color to change according to where it's located within the rays of that light source. Be sure and view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.